Welcome to Hack Your Happiness.
I've tried to keep that kind of lesson just to make sure that I'm doing things because I want to do them and not because I'm supposed to follow some sort of arbitrary rules or what other people think that I should be spending my time doing.
Are you a teen or adult looking for more happiness in every day and ways to connect with people in your life?
You've come to the right place. Hack Your Happiness is a podcast designed to bring you the behind the scenes of what brings iconic individuals happiness, plus their life hacks.
I'm Mercedes.
And I'm Anastasia.
And we're the two teens behind Small Bits of Happiness.
We're interviewing Olympic athletes, entrepreneurs, celebrities, and more.
Throughout all of our episodes, you'll find great conversations, hacks that you can take away and try in your life, inspiration, as well as unique and surprising insights. Today, we're speaking with Erika Hamden. Dr. Erika Hamden is a professor of astrophysics at the University of Arizona. She specializes in building telescopes that go into space and the stratosphere, and developing technology to make telescopes better. Erika is a leader in the field of space astrophysics, and has developed programs to help teach early career scientists to develop their own space missions. Erika inspires the both of us, along with thousands of others, by breaking down the concepts of science into simple, approachable, and understandable facts across social media. She makes these concepts really fun and easy to understand, and we both love to watch her Instagram reels. Erika is the Deputy Principal Investigator of Aspera, a NASA orbiting telescope in development. She's a former chef, a TED Fellow, an AAAS If Then Ambassador, an aspiring astronaut, and she just got her pilot's license in December. Erika is joining us today from an airport, so please excuse if there is any background noise in any of the segments. Welcome, Erika.
Thank you for having me.
Before we get into this week's episode of Hack Your Happiness, we just want to quickly say, check out our happiness wellness products designed by us for individuals of all ages to help you bring a small bit of happiness to your home with our tangible tips and tools. Check them out in the show notes. Yes, thank you for coming on our podcast today. You are so accomplished and inspiring, and we're so excited to be speaking with you today. You're an iconic astrophysicist, but take us back to the very beginning. How did your journey start, and did you always know that you wanted to work in astrophysics?
So I've always really liked space. I first learned about it when I was in like first or second grade, and my mom mentioned that there was this contest that she heard about on the news to come up with a new name for the Big Bang, which is our theory of how the universe started. And since I was like 7 years old, I was like, I don't know what that is. She said, go look it up. It was the 80s. So I went to our encyclopedia and looked up the Big Bang. And then I looked up like everything about space and the universe and stars. And then I remember at the back of the last volume of the encyclopedia was an atlas. And at the back of the atlas, it had a map of the solar system, and then a map of the galaxy, and then a map of the known universe. And I can like still picture the map of the known universe. And I remember thinking like, oh my God, this is the coolest thing ever. And so from that point on, I was really into space. I like would go to the library and take out all the books about space. I would watch all these shows about space. I was just really into it. And yeah, it's been that way since the beginning. And I felt like, okay, well, if I can go to space, I'll do that, be an astronaut. If I can't go to space, then I'll build stuff that goes to space, and then at least like a little part of me gets to go.
Amazing. I love how, your love for space started at such a young age, and that you've like carried that through to where you are at now.
I've been really lucky that a lot of people love space when they're little, and then something, they kind of get derailed. Usually like a teacher tells them they're not good at math or something, and I was really fortunate that I never really had that derailment, and I had such a strong sense of self that I'd be like, you're wrong, I'm gonna do it anyway.
I love that. You gotta be confident, and
totally.
like if you're not good at math or some sort of subject, you can always take some extra classes, do some extra studies, and like if you really want something, sometimes it takes a little extra work. But
yeah, and I think especially for math, like people are intimidated, but actually everyone's brains work slightly differently, and so a lot of times it's not that they're not good at math, it's just that the instruction that they're getting isn't designed for however their brain like processes things. And so it can take time. You have to like figure out like what's the way that you actually learn. But I like super strongly believe that there's no such thing as like a math person and a not math person, that it's just a question of how you've been taught.
I love
love
that. Exactly. Especially because sometimes, especially when you're going through like grade school, you have different teachers in like elementary school versus high school, and like
Exactly.
you know, you might grasp a concept with one teacher, and then with a different teacher, you're totally
Exactly.
thrown
And
off.
then you're like, wait, why am I not doing so well in this class? I thought I was good at math.
Exactly.
And then
it's
you kinda-
confusing.
Exactly. Well, it seems
Yeah.
like you've had a really amazing journey, and I'm so happy that your love for space stuck with you for so long. But throughout this journey, what do you think your most significant challenge has been, and how did you overcome this?
My most significant challenge actually was when I first got to college. I was like a nerdy kid, unsurprisingly. And I really wanted to go to MIT because I knew that MIT was a good place for being an astronaut. Like a lot of the astronauts that didn't go through military actually went to MIT. So I was like, okay, I'll go to MIT, get a degree in aerospace engineering, be an astronaut, like everything's gonna work out. And then I got there and I was like really unhappy. I felt like a little lost because like college was a big transition for me, and I felt like the people that I had met and was like interacting with, they were really unhappy. Like they weren't there. I thought they were going to be there because they really love science and they wanted to like learn, but people were getting degrees in like business management, and then they were going to go work on Wall Street and make a lot of money. And I was like very disillusioned. And so sorry, it's like so loud here. So at the time, it was 2001. MIT didn't have a lot of mental health facilities. I started having like panic attacks, and they were basically like, oh, you should just go home, like take a break for a couple of weeks and then come back. And so I did that, but it didn't really address any of the underlying problems. And then I went back and I was like, I don't want to be here anymore. And so I dropped out. So I didn't even last like a full semester. My parents came and picked me up, and then I kind of like went to a lot of therapy and like figured out like why am I doing things and what do I actually want to spend my time doing, and why did I become so like unmoored at MIT. So I reapplied to college. I went to Harvard. Things worked out. I had a much stronger sense of like, what did I want to do and why was I doing things? Why was I there? And what did I want to study? And I've tried to keep that kind of lesson just to make sure that I'm doing things because I want to do them and not because I'm supposed to follow some sort of like arbitrary rules or what other people think that I should be spending my time doing.
Yeah, that's so inspiring, because the thing is, I think sometimes we can really get lost in, all these expectations of what we should be doing, which we should be interested in.
Exactly.
But realistically, we can't force ourselves to have a genuine interest in anything. Like, we need to follow, if we want to be doing something that fuels us and is long-term and we won't get upset or burnt out doing it, we need to follow what we're actually interested in and passionate
and also
about.
surround ourselves with people who are excited to be there
And like-minded.
Exactly, and they're interested in the things they're following, and they're not just saying, oh, I'm doing this because I want to be rich at the end.
Yeah,
because
it's a very different motive than following your passion.
Because it's so much easier to say to give up when you're not following something that makes you genuinely happy. And on top of that, I feel like it just makes it so much more difficult. And like you were saying about expectations, I think a lot of the times we think expectations mainly come from people around us, like our parents, our family, our friends, but I don't think that's always the case. I think oftentimes we put ourselves into a bunch of expectations like, oh, I'm going to go to MIT and I'm going to just absolutely thrive there, and then you come in with this expectation, and if it's not met, you just gonna get confused and you keep trying to like push yourself onto it because you have this idea that you really like, but if it's not reality, it can make it really, really difficult.
And I think that's why it's important to kind of let life kind of sometimes play itself out, because we can only control or predict so much.
Yeah.
And like clearly things worked out and you went back to school and thrived, it seems, much more, but sometimes you have to go through that like struggle a little bit just to learn from that. But we know that you've been working on a long-standing project with a balloon telescope, and I can only imagine that this project also comes with some challenges and problems at times. So when you're facing a problem that seems unsolvable and seems overwhelming, what keeps you motivated and focused on finding the solution?
So that project that you mentioned was called Fireball. I'm actually wearing the sweatshirt for it right now.
Awesome.
It's like my coziest sweatshirt. So one of the things that keeps me going, like Fireball is a really complicated telescope. It goes on a balloon, which is like a really complicated place to put a telescope. And one of the things that keeps me going in that project and all my projects is that I know that if you give enough time for something, you'll figure out a solution. And I also know that if you have the right kind of group of people, they can come up with the solution sometimes faster than you think. Like one of the things that I try to do is if we run into a problem, I try to kind of like advertise it widely almost. Like I'll say like, hey, here's this thing that happened. Like, have you ever seen this? Or I'll try and like just be really honest to the group about what's going on, because frequently someone has on a different project, they're like, oh yeah, this happened and here's how we fixed it. And so you can like shortcut all of the hard stuff by just getting an answer. Because for the most part, the problems are not unique or like have never been encountered before. Some of the we do some technology development, and some of those problems, like you are the first person that has ever had that problem. So that's weird, but again, just trying to give time. And like some people work better under pressure, but I think teams don't work better under a lot of pressure. And so having there be like, okay, this is like we need to address this in a certain number of days or weeks, but you still have to go to sleep and like eat, and trying to make the work schedule be a little more normal. But at the same time, I like absolutely know that the people that I work with, we can figure it out. So having that trust is like, okay, well, we'll get there. We just like need some time. We need to try stuff out, and like having the patience to let people try things.
I think that having trust is so important. If you're working with other people, you need to know, I trust them to do what I ask them to do, and I trust that because I know that they're good at what they're doing, they can perform, and then we can all figure it out together. And having that kind of group mentality of saying, I know that if we work on this long enough and we keep looking, there's going to be a solution, even if this problem hasn't been encountered before and we're the first ones, because I think that definitely happens.
Yeah, but I also think what's really important, what I really like, is how you said that, obviously you have deadlines, you got to figure out and overcome these hurdles, but at the same time, you have to take time to sleep and have a proper meal and take care of yourself. And I think that that's something that we can often overlook, like if we're studying for a big midterm, or if we're preparing for an event or something like that, preparing a speech for, like, say, your debate, if you're in debate club as a teen, you might start to put off the things to take care of yourself. You might cut down on sleep. You might, start doing all these things if you don't have time, not going outdoors, all those things that help us feel good. And so I really think that, I love how you said that you prioritize also taking breaks, and as a team having time to take care of yourself while still overcoming these challenges and discovering solutions, sometimes for the first time ever. And so yeah, I think that's something that's important not to overlook, the importance of self-care, because without that we can really not be able to think as clearly and solve our problems.
Yeah. And there's definitely times where if you're like working on a problem, you actually need to give your brain a break and like do something else, and then your brain is still like thinking about it in the back, like, but you have to give it that like oh, I'm gonna go for a walk, I'm gonna take a shower, I'm gonna do something, and then in the middle of that completely unrelated task, your brain is like, oh, I figured it out, like but you have to like step away from it in order to even get that time.
Yeah, I think that's just so crazy how our brains work like that.
But what's really interesting, what I found is like different people's brains like problem solve in different times.
Yeah.
So like for instance, sometimes when you're like on a long car ride, you'll come up with a solution, or during a warm shower, or sometimes when you're like running on the treadmill or outdoors. Like, so like finding out where you problem solve, and then when you're really stuck, taking a break and doing that activity or that exercise can be so beneficial.
For sure. And I think problem solving is just such an amazing key to have, so that you know how to fix and like Mercedes said, if you're looking for a problem, you need a solution for a problem, you can like go on the treadmill or something. But what are your top 3 tips for teens for problem solving? Like, do you have any great strategies that you usually use?
Some strategies. So my like most important piece of advice for everyone is sleep enough. Like, I think our society does not value sleep, and your brain like needs it so much. It is like the most important thing that you could do is to sleep enough. Even when I was in college, I was like, I would stop working on homework and problem sets and just be like, I gotta go, I'm gonna sleep. And like my friends would stay up late working, and I'd be like, I don't care, I'm gonna get the grade that I get because I have to sleep. And for me, that if I stay up late to like do something, I'm really just stealing from the next day. Like, there isn't more time that gets created. And so especially for teenagers, I feel like the sleep is so important, and you need a lot of sleep, and the whole schedule of the world is completely opposed to the sleep schedule of a teenager, which is really unfortunate because you know, it's like your brain developing, your brain needs the sleep. So for me, the most important thing that you could do is like sleep enough. And when you're working on stuff that's challenging, be like, I only have a certain number of hours of good quality activity in the day. And if you push it, you're just stealing from the next day. You need to take a break, you need to sleep. My other kind of advice is it can feel like, you know, you're encountering and like feeling things for the first time, and that can be really overwhelming. And it's also hard to identify with other people that like, you know, now I'm like old and I'm like, oh yeah, this feelings happens all the time, and then it goes away and then it's fine. But like I remember being a teenager and feeling a lot like, oh, I've never felt like this before, I hate it, and no one understands me. And I think one of the things that I really had to learn was like nothing is permanent, and that the feelings, like, it can seem like something is really important, but it comes and goes. And in the like, kind of one of the things that I think about a lot now is how, you know, when I dropped out of MIT, I thought like, oh, this is the end of the world. And it wasn't. Like, the sun still rises, the earth is spinning, like stars are formed and galaxies rotate, and nobody cares. Like, and to me, that took a lot of the pressure off. Like, I was putting all this pressure on myself in a way that was really unhelpful. And the fact that, you know, you can get through anything. There isn't a lot of stuff that is completely insurmountable. Like, you can quit, you can like regroup, try something else. And that, I didn't have that feeling. I didn't really understand that like things don't matter as much as I think that they matter.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I really love that idea of like zooming out, realizing that yes, I'm having a challenge currently, but there's so much else happening in the world. This is not the be all end all. And like 5 years from now, I will be in a different place and I'll have a different point of view. I probably will have experienced some different problems realistically, and that's okay.
For sure. And I love what you said about sleep. I feel like sleep is so incredibly important. I know that oftentimes when I'm like working on something and it's really late at night, my brain just starts getting kind of cloudy and I can't really think properly. But if I'm on the same task the next day, like even like earlier on in the evening, I can perform and do it so much better and so much faster instead of sitting at your computer for 30 minutes thinking, what am I supposed to write? You could just kind of figure it out so much faster. So almost like you're robbing yourself of so much more than just time the next day.
How many hours a night do you aim to sleep?
So I have to sleep at least 8 hours a night. And actually I have like a very well-developed sleep routine. So like your brain likes to do the same thing every day and to like go to sleep at the same time and wake up at the same time. Like, if you have a routine that happens at the same time, your sleep will be better. Even if you try to sleep 8 hours, but you're kind of shifting it all the time, like your brain won't like that. And so I like start getting ready for bed at like 8:30 or 9 p.m. And then I try to wake up without an alarm. I usually wake up between like 6 or 7. And so I think I probably sleep maybe closer to 9 hours a night. There are a lot of people, so like the average amount of sleep that someone needs is around 8 hours. Some people need like 7, some people need 9. I think I'm on the kind of longer side. But then there are always people that are like, oh, I'm not like that, I'm different, I only need 4 hours of sleep or 5 hours sleep. And like, those people are absolutely lying to themselves. Like, you're not Thomas Edison, who probably still needed more sleep than he got. Like, you're not special. You need 8 hours of sleep. You're just like, you don't actually know what your day could be like if you slept enough. You've just gotten used to like always being tired.
It's
sure.
True.
I love sleeping. I sleep for as long as possible, but
especially on the weekends. I mean, I just love my early mornings. I try to go to sleep earlier, but yeah, it's tough to sleep in sometimes. But I get it. As teens, like, our sleep schedule, I've learned, is like we're naturally inclined to go to sleep later and then wake up later. But because of school and just general life, it's tough to sleep in all the time. So that's kind of where you have to battle with yourself and say, okay, well, I need sleep, so maybe I do need to go to sleep a little bit earlier and sacrifice on maybe some time watching TV or reading my book. And that's okay, because at the end of the day, it's all about compromising and some give and some take. But It's so true. Sleep is so essential to problem solving, and like even though it might not help solve a problem at the exact moment, it does help like overall you with your skills. So
yeah, it like sets you up so that the next day is going to be successful with whatever you want to do.
For sure.
Exactly. And there's always like little bumps in the roads that just sets you up to be able to like steer clear and steer through those a little bit easier and smoother. So many teenagers might be, you know, as we're trying to navigate career paths and our futures, might be interested in pursuing a career in STEM or in astrophysics. So what advice would you give to a teen who's thinking about potentially pursuing a career in that field?
So the first piece of advice I would give is if you want to do that as a career, or like a career in STEM, a career in astrophysics, which is great, you know, that's the only permission that you kind of need. Like you don't actually need your teachers to say like, oh yeah, you'd be great at this. You don't need anyone to tell you that it's okay. You like the fact that you want to do it is a good enough reason to start doing it. Some like practical advice would be in high school, you should take really a lot of math actually. So I took physics in high school, but the like basis of astrophysics is actually math. So I took a lot of math classes, and I have taken physics like, I don't know, 8 times. Physics is a subject where you learn it the first time and you're like, okay, this is weird, but like, let's keep going. And then you learn it again and they're like, everything we told you in the first class is just an approximation. Like, here's a better model. And then you take it again and they're like, everything we told you in the last class was also approximation. Here's like a better version. And actually you like keep doing that. So you learn like Newtonian physics, and then you learn it with calculus, and then you learn it with like more advanced math. And then you're like, actually, here's general relativity. This is like our best understanding of how the universe works. So I think actually having a lot of patience of like the kind of iterative nature of science is probably good to practice. Like I remember, you know, the 3rd or 4th time I was taking like introductory physics, and it's like, why am I still in this class? But it's just getting like, it is getting more advanced, and you're learning to think about things in like a deeper way. So for me, that was really interesting and kind of cool. That's like, oh, you're getting this view into how the universe really works. And then I remember taking quantum mechanics and being like, oh, this is so weird. Like, this is how it really works. And yeah, so I feel like being open to kind of doing things again. And then I remember the first time I took physics, I was like, this is so hard. I don't understand this, because it just requires a different way of thinking. And so another piece of advice would be like, it's okay if it's hard and you feel uncomfortable. That means that you're learning something, and that's like actually a really good feeling.
I love that, because I mean, I've taken like very, very simple basic physics, and even that was so confusing to me. So I can totally understand how like over your head it can get, but that's why I think that's a good way to know if you're passionate about it. You know, if you might be considering a career in STEM or physics, taking some of those courses throughout high school before you go study it post-secondary is probably, I mean, an essential step.
For sure. And I love how it kind of starts escalating. Like, you know, you get like your basic foundation, and then next thing you know, there's like an even better way of doing it, until like it's like funneling to like the exact very precise way of doing that. I find that so interesting.
Yes, and I really, really like how you only need really permission from yourself, because everyone will have an opinion. Your teachers will have different opinions. All of them will have different opinions.
Exactly.
Your friends, everyone is going through their own things and have had different experiences that might skew their perspectives. And that's why it's important to take everything with a grain of salt. And like, if someone's giving you constructive criticism and feedback that you can actually benefit from, then that's great. That's terrific. And take that. But if it's just something that is not going to benefit you and is just going to slow you down or throw you off a trajectory that you genuinely want to look more into or potentially pursue, like, don't let someone else's actions change your life, because that's just not fair to you.
I fully agree with that, and I think you can use that with whatever career path you want to go on, not just STEM. And it's just what I really love is how your mindset was when you were doing all these things, because, you know, a lot of teens and people could say, oh, you know, this is getting so much harder and it's going to keep getting harder. I think I'm just going to quit now, and like, while I'm still ahead. But I think that what you did is you kind of saw it as, oh, this is so cool how it keeps getting harder and harder. And I find that so interesting. I want to find out how all of it works at the most precise, specific level. And I think that's such a great way to come into it, as well as saying, I know I'm going to be uncomfortable, but that's how I know that I'm actually getting better and I'm starting to understand this topic. And I think that's just such a great way of approaching things, so that you're actually not just
And trusting the process.
exactly trusting the process. So this is
it reminds me of like I do a lot of yoga, and the like I can do the same kind of class, the same sequence of poses over and over, and it never gets any easier. Like I get better at certain things, but then you like find other things that make it still a challenge. And so, you know, the like you learn something, that part gets easier, but there's something else that is like still a challenge and is still interesting.
For sure. Yeah, so in a little bit of a twist in direction, you work on a lot of really big projects with a lot of different people. And as teens, we spend a lot of time also working with different types of people, whether it means working with, you know, groups in school or with our sports team, and even, you know, at home with our family. That also still kind of counts as spending time with a group. So what are your tips for being able to collaborate the best with other people?
This is such a good question, because I remember as a kid I did not like group projects, and I didn't like having to work with other people, and I think I just wasn't good at it. I think one of the things that I've had to learn is like you have to let go of control a little bit, and that was something I was not good at in my youth. But that like everyone can bring something interesting to the table, and you have to give them the opportunity to do that. I also now like, you know, I think about what are the people like that I'm working with, and I only want to work with people that are fun and nice and like pleasant to be around. And you know, if I work with someone and I'm like, I don't like this, then I try to think a little bit about like why, but I also really pay attention to that feeling like of oh, this person makes me feel bad for whatever reason, and I like notice that, and then the next time around, if I'm making a group, I like don't want to work with that person. So paying attention to like, oh, I love spending time with this person, I don't like doing stuff with this person, I like pay attention to those kind of feelings. And then I think having really clear tasks or roles for everybody, like this person is doing this person is doing this, the due dates for these things are these days. And then if I'm the leader of the team, I try to remind people and also provide some like leeway if people are like, oh, I just had a baby or whatever, then I'm like, of course you're not going to do this, so we'll figure something else out. So like also having one of the really important things in the team dynamic is that you have enough slack in the team, that there are people aren't being overburdened, they can be flexible with things. That is something that I think it really gets lost in kind of modern America, where everyone is like working to the last minute deadline, everyone's doing too much, and trying to be like the team has enough resources, enough people, enough time that if something happens, we can still fix it. And that also makes the team members feel valued, that like people are giving you their time, and their time is like basically the most valuable thing that they have. And so I try to really make sure that we plan stuff in advance. It's really clear what's going to happen when things are due, and to just provide like a structure that people feel supported in.
I love that.
Incredible. Yeah, because I think that's so important in working with others and interacting with others, whether that's friends, family, a team, a partnership, anything like that, is being flexible and understanding. Because of course you want to spend time with people who make you feel good, and not, you know, purposefully and voluntarily place yourself into scenarios where people might not be treating you the best. But sometimes, sadly but surely, we are like grouped with people who we might not interact with the best. And then being flexible and understanding and thinking, hey, like maybe this person can do this and then you can do that because you're stronger at this, and just like being flexible and understanding in the sense of also like maybe they're having a bit of a tough day, if this is like a one-off situation where they're acting a little bit strange, and also just like being flexible again. Like I think flexibility is such a key part to working with other people, because we can't control others' actions.
Exactly.
And so like just accepting people sometimes for who they are, even if it's not the best, is important.
And I feel like oftentimes as well is, I know for sure, I understand how you felt when you were younger as well. I used to have it like a lot like that too. I wanted to be really, really in control. I wanted to do most of the work, or at least be very controlling about all the work situation. But I think in the end, what I realized was that you're gonna get burnt out if you keep doing that, because then you're basically carrying the whole project yourself. And the reason why there's a whole group is so that you don't have to do that, so that you can divide the work and get it done better if every person is able to specifically focus on one part. And you can't do everything yourself, no matter how much we try, no matter how much we want to. But being able to be flexible with other people and patient and understanding that we're not going to be able to do everything ourselves. So.
Totally, that's so important. And like being okay with other people doing work
Exactly.
can be
Yeah.
so stressful at times, but like that's just a part of life, and we're never going to
Yeah.
be able to do everything ourselves, and that's just not a sustainable approach.
Also giving people the opportunity to kind of prove themselves, that like you give them the work and then they can do a good job. And I mean, that's something that I have had to also learn as I'm teaching students, like in my classes, of like, if you expect a lot of someone, they will try to meet it, like given the right support and the right circumstances, that like having high expectations means people will do better work. And so that's also really interesting to like give the team that opportunity and then see how they can rise to the occasion.
Totally. And like I think what I really learned as well is like you want to tell people when they've done a good job. Like if you're working on a sports team together and someone scores a point, you should congratulate them and make them feel good for that. Not just tell people when they've done something wrong.
Exactly.
You want to reassure them when they've done something right.
And that'll make them want to achieve it more next time, because they get all that validation and then they start to feel good about themselves, and they associate doing that and achieving good things comes with good feelings and good validation, instead of, oh, you achieved something, that's great, but like
On to the next thing.
just associating good achievements with good feelings is such a great motivator.
Exactly. So as we mentioned in the introduction, you have an amazing social media platform where you share science, and you've really inspired Anastasia and I both. We love your content, and you're so like energetic and personable when you share these online science facts. And I'm just wondering, do you find it difficult to break down these complicated science topics into understandable bits and pieces?
It can be challenging. I think a lot of times, I mean, it depends on the subject. So some stuff I feel like space is really cool, and it doesn't take that much effort to be like, hey, here's how a star works. Like one thing is pulling, the other thing is pushing. But then there are subjects like I want to be able to explain like general relativity or quantum mechanics and stuff. And so that stuff, because it is so weird, it's not even like there is complicated math behind a lot of it, but the basic concept is just that it's weird, and so that makes it hard to explain. But a lot of the development, so like when Einstein was coming up with general relativity, he would think of these situations like people on trains turning flashlights on, or like lighting a candle or whatever, and the examples that he used were very ordinary to kind of illustrate how weird this thing is. And so I try to think about that, of like, you know, you can explain the concept of general relativity by just talking about people riding trains around and turning lights on. What I try to do is like I don't want to mislead people. Like sometimes with these sort of esoteric subjects, or talking about black holes, you can use an analogy that isn't exactly right, even though it sort of gets the point across. But then I think if someone is really interested in that and they dig deeper, then they'll be like, oh, this wasn't right. And I don't want them to have that feeling. So it is a little tricky to be like, I want to give you a precise explanation that is understandable but still correct. And so that can be hard, but it's also fun. And I like think about it in my head as I'm going around my day, like, how would I explain this to someone? And some of the videos I like have explained almost exactly the same thing to my students, and so that class is helpful because then I can like practice what I want to say.
I think that's so amazing, and you are so good at it. But
Yeah, we love
I
it.
feel like just having that skill of being able to like almost explain a topic to like a 5-year-old or someone who really does not understand it is such a way of demonstrating how you actually understand the concept, to be able to break it down into such a simple, understanding way that is still accurate.
And I think it's so awesome what you do, because so many teens, you know, they don't know what's out there, and they don't know what they might want to pursue in the future. And so your content, I think, is so helpful, because kids can learn what the world is about, and they can learn some of the concepts that they could study in the future, and have some familiarity, and therefore
approach it without being like, oh, this is so overwhelming and I don't understand all of this and the equations are just too much. But it's like understanding it at like a fundamental level and being able to know, is this interesting to me or not? And then we can kind of continue from there.
I mean, it's similar to my feeling about people learning math, that I think if something is explained correctly, anybody can learn anything. And just a lot of times it's the explanation that is lacking. And so I kind of like spreading that feeling of like, if you have someone who is explaining things to you in a careful way, you can learn anything. And I wish more people had that attitude, because I think, I think about all the people on Earth and how they have such incredible skills and talents, but sometimes they don't know it, or they're not using it, or like this is I'm like such an optimist, but I think that everyone is the Mozart of something. Like there's something that they're so good at, that, and they have to find what that is. And so part of the videos is because like I know that there are people who are the next Einstein, or like going to develop the incredible science discoveries. And so I want them to know that they're the Einstein of that thing.
Yeah, and just like giving them the opportunity to find out about it, so that if they are interested in it, they can kind of follow that rabbit hole down and just kind of become that Einstein and the Mozart of
I love that mindset, because even if it's not anything to do with science, maybe it's art, or maybe it's helping other people, or maybe it's some sort of invention or history or anything. Really, you could be the Mozart of anything. And I really love that, because it's so important to know that you have a talent, that you are special, because a lot of the times if we don't hear it when we're little, or as kids or teens, we don't believe it. Even if there's something, and if we never discover that, then we never believe it. But it's important to have the original and the initial motivation to kind of look for what we're interested in, because if we're interested in something, it's likely that that is the thing that we are the Mozart of, or that we are going to be really good at, especially if we put in the time and the energy to pursue and learn a lot about it.
I agree. And I mean, you have been in this industry for a while. You've worked on so many amazing and interesting projects. But can you share any interesting or surprising discoveries that you've made in your research?
So let's see. I've made a few, I think, like fun discoveries. So, well, these are fun for me. I work on detector development, so I help build the like light sensors that go in the telescopes that I work on. And as part of that work, so if your telescope is in the infrared, which is a wavelength of light that is less energetic than visible, it's like we sort of interpret it as almost like heat. If you're like feeling heat coming off of something, it's actually putting out a lot of infrared light. But infrared telescopes, like the new James Webb Space Telescope, they are looking at kind of heat energy. And in order to do that, you need the telescope itself to be cold, and all of the mirrors and stuff have to be cold. And that's because if you don't cool them, then you're actually just going to look at the thermal energy of the telescope and not of any of the objects. So that's like a well-known thing for infrared telescopes, but for the wavelength that I work in, which is ultraviolet, it's much more energetic. And we didn't really realize that you actually needed that same kind of, you need to actually cool your telescope a little bit, not as much. But so one of the things we discovered, I'm working with this new type of detector that can count every single photon that hits it. It's called photon counting. And it's super sensitive. And the more sensitive the detector is, the more like other sources of noise there are. And so we realized when we were doing testing that we could actually measure the temperature of the vacuum chamber that the detector was sitting in. The detector is kept really cold, like minus 100 degrees Kelvin, but the vacuum chamber itself is just sitting in the room and at room temperature. And we realized like, oh, if you cool the front of this a little bit, the kind of noise in the detector goes down because it sees these thermal photons, and it's like once per hour, but it's we can measure it. So that was kind of cool. That's like, oh, we thought that in the UV we didn't need to do the same things that they do in the infrared, but actually if you want to get down to this certain level of low noise, you actually need to cool other parts of the system that you didn't think mattered. And so that was kind of fun. I mean, it's annoying for telescope design because then you have more things that you need to cool, but I felt like, oh, we're really getting down to like a deep understanding of how this detector operates, that we're able to see all these little bits. And so that was a pretty cool result for for our project.
Amazing.
Really cool.
I think it's so cool when you discover something new, and like the feeling that must bring is like, wow, like we're learning something that's going to help others in the future of development. And that's just such a cool feeling, like it's a contribution. And so like that's awesome. Congratulations on that.
Thank you.
Do you have, thinking back to your teenage self, and I know it can be so weird to think about ourselves in the past versus where we are at in the present, but what is one piece of advice that you wish you could tell your teenage self?
So I would probably tell her not to take things so seriously. Like, yeah, I would like tell her to just like chill out a little bit, and that, I think I grew up in a big family. I was like very academically inclined, and I feel like I would say like, you could mess up, but things are going to be okay. And like, I think I felt like at the time that I was like walking this tightrope of, I want to do great in school. I want to do good in athletics. I need to go to the right college. I need to do this. I need to do that. And I realized now as an adult that there's so many ways to get to where you want to be. And like, I meet people who got PhDs, but they were like, there was people I know who like, they were accountants beforehand, and or one person who, she was a rockette for a few years before she went back to school. And that there's so many different ways to kind of get to the goal. There isn't only one path. And I think I didn't realize how I don't know, flexible the world is, and that you can try things and have them not work and try something else, and that one of the things I really learned by dropping out of MIT was like, my value as a person has nothing to do with what I achieve. And you can mess up, people are still going to love you. Tell her to just like chill out a little, try new things, don't be so worried about the outcome.
That's such a great perspective, because I think a lot of times as teenagers, we have that same type of tightrope vision, and we don't realize that there's other ways to get to our goals, and there's not only like a one-way path, and if we don't make it to every single milestone on that trail, then we're completely messed up for all of our life, and that's it. Like after the age of 25, that's like there's nothing left anymore. But that's so untrue, and I'm so happy that you share that, because like you have achieved so much, and in terms of academics and discoveries and science and all this incredible stuff and social media. And so I think that a lot of teenagers would look up to you, and like if they wanted to pursue a career in STEM, have that similar mindset, but knowing that there's so many different ways to get to where you want to be, and it's not a linear path, it's a back and forth. There's going to be ups and downs, and you're going to learn things in many ways through success and through struggle, and that's okay, is good and really reassuring.
And like I think the most important thing is to know what you really love. Like that's what gives you the kind of star to navigate towards. Is you have to be honest with yourself of like, oh, I just love this thing, like whatever, that you become the Mozart of. But you have to like it takes some vulnerability and honesty to be like, what I really love is this, and I'm just gonna go for that.
Totally agree. So what do you think that you do every single day that brings you a small bit of happiness?
Oh, there's so many things. I'm like, I love little bits of happiness. Like it's so important. So one of the things recently is that I bought a house a couple years ago in Tucson, and I got lots of native plants put in the backyard. And I told the landscaping woman, she was like, what's the vibe that you want? And I was like, actually, I really want birds of prey to come to the yard, because I love birds of prey, like hawks and falcons. She was like, no one's ever asked for that before. And that was a few years ago, and it's taken some time for the plants to kind of like get established. And this spring, every morning I wake up and I look out the window of my bedroom, and there's sometimes there's two of them, and sometimes there's just one. It's a Cooper's hawk, mostly a female Cooper's hawk, and she sits in this tree in the neighbor's yard, and I can see her, and she's just there in the morning, like chilling out. They have a nest in a different tree, and so I'm like always like, oh, where is she? What is she doing? And I like check for her in the morning and see her, and then usually she sits there for a few minutes, and then she'll like fly off and then be back later. So recently my like bit of happiness is like, what's the hawk doing?
I love that. That's so cool, because I think nature has so much to offer, and like whether it's looking for birds or looking for different plants or flowers or trees, there's so much to look for by just looking outside your window or going for a little walk outside. And so like that's such a beautiful way to detach from work or school or whatever's going on inside of our own heads, and just like focus on the world and realize that these animals are living their own life and have their own whole thing going, and it's so beautiful to think about.
I agree.
So, do you have a specific motivational quote that you love and remember? And if you do, why?
So I love motivational quotes. I think it can be cheesy, but I just think that they're so helpful to think about. And so my favorite one is I actually can't even think of the guy's name. He's a programmer, and he has this quote about just starting things. And he says, "The only secret is to begin." That like if you want to do something, there's no secret to doing something. You just have to start it, and that's it. And like I love that because it just means like if you want something, you just have to start doing it. And there's no I don't know, like secret code, or you don't have to have inside access or whatever. You're just like, okay, I want this, I'm gonna start doing it, and that's it. And I like that. And it's like if you want something, you just go for it.
Learn and grow along the way. Exactly.
Totally. Like, and there's never a really good time to do something. It's never gonna be the perfect.
You're never
time.
gonna wake up and be like,
Today
today's the perfect
is the
day.
I just feel
you have
ready
to
go.
you have to decide that for yourself, and that's the most important thing. And there's never, I think sometimes, especially when we're like still in school, we can be like, oh, I'm gonna start my business once I graduate, or I'm gonna learn something new when I graduate, I'll get a job later, I'll do this, I'll do that, I'll donate later, whatever it is that you want to do, I'll write my book later. But you can always postpone, you can always procrastinate. There's always going to be something that could stop you, and so you need to initiate, because at the end you hold that power.
Exactly. And sometimes I feel like we're a bit scared of being beginners because we want to be experts right away, because we see all these people that we admire who are experts. But just remembering that every expert was once a beginner,
and they had a moment where they started.
Exactly. And just knowing that is just so motivational and helps you get on the way. So do you have anything exciting coming up that you would like to share with us? Any goals you've got or events happening, etc.?
The thing I'm thinking about the most is actually there's probably two things related to work. The first is I've been working on this telescope project called Aspera that you mentioned in my intro, which is this small telescope. We are in the build stage now, so we're getting the optics in, and we're like putting stuff in mounts, and then gonna align everything. So that's really cool. That is gonna launch in 2025, and so we're getting to a point where it's like, oh, this is real, and it's gonna be in space soon. So I'm pretty excited about that. And then I have another project which is in an earlier phase. It's this telescope concept that I've proposed to NASA a couple of times, and we expect that they're going to ask for another set of proposals also in 2025 in like late summer. And so I'm starting to get the team together to like work on that and like repropose it. And we had really good review last time, but for a couple of reasons it wasn't selected. It like wasn't the right time. But I think we're in really good shape for next year. So I'm excited to kind of get back into that project and like propose it again. And I like the proposal process because it feels very like optimistic and it's full of possibilities. And so I'm happy to get back with that team because it was such a fun group of people to work with. So those are the two things. I guess it's like long term that I'm excited in 2025 for telescope activity.
I know, it's crazy how fast. I feel like 2024, it seems like I'm still in like February, but
I know.
It's almost like it's like summer is coming up and we're halfway through the year almost here, so it's coming soon.
Time
and
is just
that's
moving
very exciting.
Really fast. And I don't know if
So
I'm here
fast.
for it or I'm like not here for it.
Depends. I'm ready for summer, but not for it to be a whole nother year yet. But
I
we
don't
still
know if
got
I'm
lots of
ready
time.
for the school year to start again.
Not yet. But yeah, that's so exciting. Is there anywhere where our audience can find you if they want to keep up and learn more?
Yeah, so you can follow me on Instagram. It's just my name, Erika Hamden, and I'm also on TikTok. I'm on Twitter. I don't post as much, but probably Instagram is the best place to find me. And I usually update about whatever silly things I'm up to and my videos, of course.
Amazing. Well, those will all be linked in the show notes for anyone who is interested. And I just want to say, on behalf of both of us, thank you so much for joining us here
This
today.
has been absolutely amazing.
Thank you so much for having me. This has been so fun.
Thank you so much for listening to this week's episode of Hack Your Happiness, and thank you so much to Erika for joining us this week.
She is so inspiring, and I absolutely loved listening to her story, between her relatability because of the struggles that she's experienced to her absolute absolute inspiration by all the projects she's working on, the discoveries that she's making, and the leadership skills that she possesses and that she shared with us. So what's your biggest takeaway from today, Anastasia?
I think my biggest takeaway is to be flexible with other people and working with them in a group, because sometimes it's really important to delegate, especially when there is a lot of stuff going on, but also be flexible with yourself, because we all need sleep, whether it's around 8 hours or over. I know I usually require a little bit more because
10 hours?
I mean, I'm still a teen, so I'm still getting there. But, you know, I just think that having sleep and taking care of yourself and being flexible with yourself and loving yourself is so important for us to be successful like Erika. What about you, Mercedes?
And to also, I just want to add on to your point before I get into my biggest takeaway, and that is that all those things of being flexible with other people and with ourselves are so essential for successful problem solving skills, because if we want to be able to problem solve, especially on a variety of different fronts, we need to be able to get other people to help us. And that leads into my biggest takeaway from today, and that is the importance of self-care in problem solving, because oftentimes we think that in order to be an efficient problem solver, we just need to constantly be sitting there and focusing on the issue, brainstorming ideas, but truly that can be effective, but only to a certain extent. And if we overwork ourselves, we won't be capable of coming up with very efficient or effective solutions. So if you can't come up with a good solution and your teammates are also not able to come up with a good solution at this point, take a break, go to a place where you feel comfortable and where you find your ideas come to you the most and the best. And also give yourself that self-care of sleep, hygiene, time in the nature, and time outside.
If you enjoyed this week's episode, please leave us a 5-star review from wherever you're listening. It really helps us out and we really appreciate it.
Also, be sure to join our happiness family. It really helps us out. We'd love to have you, and it's completely free. And you can join our happiness family by following us on whichever podcast listening platform you're on now.
See you next time!